I think that's the
welcome
problem.
to the podcast, Ricardo. It's good to finally see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Marketing Trench. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of selling value versus discounts or kickbacks. And let me set the table here. This is a conversation that I actually introduced to the guys just this morning. And here's what happened. So earlier this week, I was leading my sales team meeting. And, I laid out what's happening in the market. Hey, it's all over the place right now. Inventory is low. Demand is very high. Properties are moving quickly. Most of the business is going to people who are established, but there's, as the market grows, as it normally does this time of year, there's increasing amount of opportunity for smaller players in the market. And then I laid out 3 different ways that my team could capitalize on those trends. I talked about things we've talked about here on the podcast. I said, hey, you could introduce everyone to Loom and show them how they could do a Loom video walking all of their clients through Altos reports, right? And I actually put together an example. Like, I recorded myself on Loom walking through a market report from Altos in the city of Tustin. I'm like, this is what this could look like, right? And I introduced 2 other things like that, okay? And you guys have led enough talks to know what it's like when you're all fired up about something and you look across the room and you just mock people, right? Like that expression.
You get the blank stare.
Yeah. And I know what's going through several of my team members' heads, right? Like I know these people well enough to know that this is their thought. This doesn't apply to me, right? And sure enough, as soon as I stopped talking and I said, what do you guys think of all this? The first thing I got hit with was, hey, I had a client who told me that she's no longer going to send me any business because she's moved brokerages and the broker is paying her to use the in-house escrow company. So what about that, right? And then as soon as that question was asked, the follow-up question came from somebody else, which was, hey, I'm still hearing that other escrow companies aren't charging seller-side escrow fees. And some companies are paying for print, they're paying for photography, they're paying for videography, and
all that illegal stuff.
Oh yeah, right. And it's illegal, but the way that escrow companies get around it is the executive in charge of the escrow company sets up an unrelated second company that pays for all of this stuff, right? And this is just rampant in our industry. Everyone knows that it's happening. And so, my sales team, and we don't do that, right? Like we just don't do that. And we've never done that. And that's been a policy here. And I really do believe, guys, I really believe in the stuff we're talking about. But I want to know, if you're a lender and you're up against, you're talking to consumers and you're up against people who just
lenders get shopped on interest rates all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where I went when Dustin said that he had this experience. I was like, this is almost the exact same thing that lenders deal with. And it's really it's that cost trap, right? It's where the focus is on cost and not because your entire relationship. Well, this is what it comes down to at the end of the day. If your entire relationship is built on price, you will always lose 100% of the time to a lower price. Your relationship has to be built on something more valuable than price.
Realtors are competing against like what? iBuyer model.
iBuyer, discount brokers,
and discount brokers selling,
rebate,
1%, 1% listings.
Yeah.
So if I guess let's start. Let's start with my situation. So I'm leading a team. I do some sales, but not every day, right? I've got a company to run. Like, we've got a lot of things going on right now. I don't have time to be out in the field, selling all the time, but I'm leading a team of people who are selling. So if you are a real estate, like, put yourself in the shoes of a broker or a lender that has a bunch of loan officers working under them, like, what do you do when you've got these people who are, on your team who are saying, man, I'm up against this and I'm not grabbing your guys' vision for creating video content and all the rest. Like, it's just not making sense to me. Like, how would you start that conversation?
Scott?
I mean, well, let's back up a little bit. I want you to unpack this some more. So what are you specifically asking your agent? What were you asking your agents to do? Were you asking your agents to educate the real estate agent on what's going on in the market, or to teach the agents how to use Loom and Altos research to bring value to their clients?
I mean, I see it as he's asking his sales reps to find ways to add value.
Yes.
Just find ways to add value. Talk of, what are agents struggling with right now? And let me show you these 1 or 2 items of value that will hopefully help you with your prospecting challenges. He's just asking them to add value.
So if that's a company value that you deliver that message, it almost feels to me like I wouldn't count on individual salespeople to do that. And for me, I would almost hire somebody to create that stuff for them to distribute to everyone. Because what happens is if you ask a specific salesperson to do this, then what happens when you have turnover? Then you've got this whole training thing that you have to teach them how to do that again.
No.
I think you need to do it. I think you absolutely have to bring value, but I think where you're seeing the breakdown is how do I get these 7 people to deliver the same level of value so that we're delivering a consistent customer experience? And I think that's the resistance you're running into, because was there at least one of your salespeople that said, that was awesome, I'm gonna jump on this and do it?
Yeah, there was.
So it's not a bad idea. You didn't have a problem with relaying the value of that particular strategy. You're having a problem with adoption.
Right, because they look at it and they say, yeah, Dustin, talking about Loom videos and using Altos reports isn't going to fire up my agents when they're getting $700 from their broker to use the in-house escrow company.
This is such a cop-out. But but how much do you lose if the escrow screws up and falls out? It's a $15,000 commission that you lose. So you can go ahead and gamble $700 at a time, but over the next 10 escrows, do you run the risk of ruining a relationship that's going to cost you a bunch more money in the long run?
What's the average sales price for a house in Newport?
In Newport?
Newport.
Well, that's where you guys have a lot of your clients, right?
Yeah. Well, Newport and Irvine. So yeah, that's a great question. All right, let's just use $1 million.
Let's just use $1 million. Right. What's a commission on $1 million?
For an agent?
Yeah.
$2,000 or $20,000 minimum?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want me to give you $500 for some flyers, or do you want me to help you generate like a $20,000 commission?
Right. But see, here's part of the problem though, right? Because agents view escrow, title, and lending all as commodity. Lending a little bit less so, but they see us as commodities. It's like if it's good enough, it gets across the line, right? And it's like, how often do I really lose an escrow because my escrow officer sucks? I mean, honestly, the answer is rarely, right? Now, future business maybe, right? Because if you're a real estate agent and you pump somebody through a bad escrow, that reflects badly on you. And in the end, like, people just aren't going to refer you very much. Even if you were really great, they're going to be like, yeah, man, I had kind of a meh experience, right? But it's just so abstract. Like, you have to have a salesperson who can who really believes that. And I almost feel like the only way that you do is if you've been in the business long enough to actually see it happen, right?
Well, I would also argue, especially if there's team leaders listening to this, or business owners or something like this, you're getting resistance to a tactic, but you don't have a well-established strategy. You don't have a history and there's a big difference between saying that we need to deliver value and having it a regular part of your weekly meetings where you're constantly drilling it in. What you're trying to do is you're trying to shift the culture of your sales team to be able to identify these opportunities and always have this value add engagement or something as part of what they're doing. So you kind of introduce this to them one time, and you're going to get pushback and you're going to get resistance because, well, I know my agents and they're never going to do this, but that's one tactic, right? There are an unlimited number of tactics to build value. And I think you have to, now you've introduced the dialogue around adding value and making it above and beyond price, and you got incredible feedback. Now you have you basically have a rebuttal. You have an objection now. You're hearing the objections. Now start thinking about the rebuttals and work on the rebuttals as a team. And you make this as a team effort. This is one of the things that I always say. I've been up and speaking in front of groups, hundreds of loan officers, and I'll ask, raise your hand if you think you deliver the best service, and all the hands go up, right? And I'm like, okay, that's cool, except for the delivery of a service experience is a trailing indicator. Everybody's an expert until you need one. Right. So when the shit hits the fan, oh, there goes our rating. Sorry. When the shit hits the fan, you need an expert. But when it doesn't, it could be somebody who's barely hanging on by a thread. If there's no problems, you don't need an expert. And that's where it's important, is the low-hanging fruit anybody can get, but earning that business and earning that trust that's going to earn you a greater lifetime value of that relationship, that comes when the rubber hits the road. That comes when there's bumps. That comes when you get a flat tire on your way to vacation, right? Vacation being their commission check, and they have a blowout. How do you fix that blowout so now they always call you because they want to prevent that from happening in the future? I don't think what you're trying to do is not hitting the mark. I think that because it's new to your team, and it's not a part of your regular typical dialogue. And I think that's important. I think you need to roll it into your culture, roll it into your weekly meetings, and keep talking about it. And quite frankly, you telling them what to do is not nearly as effective as asking them what ideas they have to bring value above price. This isn't your problem to solve. This is your team's problem to solve, because it impacts everybody's income, right?
If I was one of your sales reps and I was, doing a cold call, I know that I'm probably going to get a no. If it's just a phone call, I need to go for the appointment, because it's during the appointment that I communicate my value. If I just made a series of calls to say, hey, can I show you how to leverage Altus reports, blah, 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 that's not the right environment for me to be able to showcase my value.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I fish for that appointment, and I mean, I get those objections all the time. No, thanks, I'm already set, or we already have a long-standing relationship. And it's not until we sit for the appointment and go through the entire exercise that it's like, oh wow, we can do this. This is awesome.
Well,
you have my attention.
We ran into this all the time with our Facebook masterclass, right? The Facebook ads masterclass. Everybody would say, "Oh yeah, no, I've got a guy. I already run Facebook ads, but what are you doing?" And so they would ask about it. But no, that's valuable.
So on the lending side, Scott, how do you get yourself in a position where you're not like you're preventing the whole shopping on price?
You'll never prevent somebody from shopping on price, just like what Dustin is experiencing right now. You will never prevent that. You'll never be able to prevent somebody wanting the $700 in order to do it. I haven't originated in a few years, so I'm not having these conversations on a daily basis, but I do have these conversations with Josh on a pretty regular basis. Mm-hmm. And what he basically does is he's upfront. He's like, listen, I am not going to be the cheapest out there. If you search around, somebody will tell you they will give it to you cheaper, but I am the absolute best at what I do. And here's why. I have this experience. I have this team. We're paperless. We're a seamless escrow company. We provide these things. You have to before you can sell value, you need to identify your value. I think that's the important part, is you need to sit down either by yourself or with your team and say, why would somebody give up $700 to work with us? And list that out and have that conversation.
So let me put a scenario. I had an agent who lost a few listings to a few people in her sphere, because the conversation was, well, the market's so hot right now. Everything's selling for over asking. So I thought I'd give, this new agent a shot. Like, why does it matter? I don't need an expert if everything's just flying off the shelves anyway. I think there's an opportunity there. I would venture to say
there's no trust there. There's no relationship. Somebody doesn't say that if they trust you implicitly. And so there wasn't enough trust built into that relationship. And what that probably is, Ricardo, is a lack of following up on your past client database. And that's because most people have the mentality, and I would argue that salespeople have the mentality that once the sale is done, the relationship is secured, and I don't have to maintain it.
It's locked in.
It's locked in. Yeah. So once we get married, I don't have to work on the relationship anymore because we're hitched.
What was that, Dustin?
Who thinks like that? So, Scott, I want to really try and surface something here that I think you've brought us to, which is really great. So my thinking is, I'm leading this sales team meeting. I'm going to work through this. So let me move slow. Also, I'm tired. I don't know why. My coffee did not work today. So as I'm in the meeting, as the leader of a sales team meeting, I feel like part of my job is to inspire my team, get them excited about, like, hey, we're going to win more business, right? And then also help them to know how to close deals. And so when I'm pitching them this stuff like the Altos and the Loom and all that, like what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, hey, like, deliver this little nugget, to your people, and it will get them excited. But that's kind of the problem with that, is that it's hyper focused on kind of winning business in these immediate moments. And what I hear you bringing us to is, if you're going to talk about things like Loom and Altos and all the rest, that's fine. But you need to talk about it in the context of building a relationship and specifically establishing trust. And you have to understand that these aren't things that you use. They're not conversion points, right? Like, you don't dangle a Loom video out in front of people to say, now give me your escrow. It's more like,
in the introduction of Altos and Loom is, hey, here's one example of how we can do it. What other ways can you guys think of that can deliver, that can invest in this relationship, so we're not sitting on a rocky foundation that is only supported by price?
Yes, yeah, because if somebody introduces price as a factor,
it's over.
It's over, right? Because the relationship isn't like, you don't go. I never once went to any of the lenders I worked with, whether it was you guys or some of the prior lenders I work with. Never once during the process do I remember coming to them and saying, hey, we're most of the way through a refi, but I happened to talk to somebody over at B of A and got a better price, right? Like, for me, I was driven by the relationship. But when I would introduce somebody to you guys or to another lender, those people who didn't have the relationship with you guys, they had the relationship with me, they would be paying attention to price the whole time. And that's when the ask would, like, they would come to me and say, hey, so I've been using your guy, but I just got a call from Chase, my banker, and they said that they can give me this rate, blah, 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 blah. And this actually happened to Josh. And Josh was so good about it because he's like, I'm not going to let some chump at Chase beat me. Right. And Josh goes,
that's awesome.
Josh doesn't have fight or flight mode like most humans. He has fight or kill you mode.
That's pretty much true. choose your death.
And look, he fought for the deal and he got it because he's
I will annihilate you.
I will annihilate Chase. That was basically what happened. And some Chase guy got nuked from orbit. But anyway, Josh had to fight for the deal. But that's really interesting because it is about relationship building. And maybe even
Josh is also really, really good at being able to express his value.
Yes.
And he goes straight to his experience. He
You
goes
could tell
straight.
he's been doing that for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. And he has that level of confidence in the service that he's going to deliver and the experience that he's going to deliver, that he can confidently say that. But he's like, around our office, he talks about that almost every single day. Like he sees scenarios every single day. So I would argue that almost at least on a weekly basis, somewhere in your office, some salesperson is going to have a relationship that's being jeopardized, right? And there's an opportunity to address that specific potential loss of a relationship and really unpack it and figure out how to deliver more value or how to address it. And then you're going to learn how to do that by doing it. But up to this point, this is something that you have to practice. You have to first be able to identify and define your value and make that something that is in your tool bag that you always have as a rebuttal for any
it's almost always a part of your ongoing conversations with people. Every conversation is building or adding on your value.
Yeah, I mean,
well, and there's two different things. There's also two different things we're talking about here. There's different types of relationships. So in your situation, you have ongoing relationships with these. That's different than a rate shopper for a mortgage lender. That's like you have to be the quickest draw and you have to be the sharpest aim in order to overcome that objection. But you don't have to in your business, in your service-based business. And I think as a real estate agent, mortgage broker, or say an escrow company, you also don't have to. It doesn't have to be that when you're talking about your past client database. How do you get those referrals? How do you get that repeat business? How do you get that next listing? And that's investing in the relationship after it's happened. So there's two things we're really looking at here. We're looking at continuing to build the relationship once the trust and transaction is completed, and that's going to create a greater lifetime value. And then there's how do you overcome that objection when the relationship is new, when it's not based on anything. So for instance, what we do in the mortgage business is we're like, listen, you know what? There's a lot of different kinds of lenders out there. Have they provided you with a loan estimate? Let me take a look at it. And if they truly can beat my price, I'll be honest with you and I'll let you know. And if you want to make a decision on price and not experience, and then usually what Josh will do is he'll look up the NMLS number on the NMLS Consumer Access and see what their experience is. And he wins it every time almost on that, because it's almost inevitably somebody who's been in the business for 1 year and they're talking out of their ass, right? And they're just saying things that aren't true, or there's fees packed in there that they're just excluding, right? Yeah. So there are different types of relationships, but for yours, it really starts with retroactively building relationships with people that you think are already committed to you or should be committed to you. And that's different from creating value moving forward. It's not a different process, but they're not different tactics, but it's a different thought process on how do you engage in that conversation so that you can start to show that value.
Yeah. So, and I think also maybe it's important to kind of lay out the value propositions in multiple phases. So, for example, there's the value proposition that kind of gets us in the door as an initial introduction. For Lighthouse, that might look like something like, hey, we have highly paperless delivery of escrow. We care about the environment. We're tied into, adoption, all the rest. And by the way, from a service perspective, we focus on answering our phones. We focus on being highly responsive to emails like that. We make sure that our escrow officers are well supported so that they can be the first line of contact, not some assistant, all this kind of stuff, right? And we have all that iterated. And so that gets you sort of an initial conversation. That might get you the meeting, right? But then I feel like there's a second phase where you're talking about where we talk about a lot more of the stuff that we discuss on this podcast, right? It's like, hey, I'm gonna, I'll talk to you every single week about market updates, or I've got a lot of ideas about how to use video to help you become a more creative marketer out in the industry, and we can talk about those, once or twice a month if you want to do that, right? I'm an accountability coach for a lot of my clients. This is something that I personally do, and I'm encouraging my agents to do it, right? It's like, hey, what are your goals? I'll hold you to them. Do you want me to hold you to them?
Well, again, we're talking culture now, right? So you're talking culture, and you're talking every single conversation every single conversation you have, these trust building pieces should be in there. It's if all you're doing is answering the questions of your clients, you're not building trust. Well,
you are, right, but like it's just one way of doing it, and it's not going to check all the trust building boxes. It's not going to make you trust asset rich.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, here's the answer, and here's why this is our answer, because this is what we found, with our other customers, with our other experiences. And by the way, here might be another question that you haven't asked me yet that's very closely related to this. So it's really training your sales team to identify those opportunities to build value. And I mean, it's almost like a game. It's like you've got this whole goodie bag, and how do you set up the conversation, or how do you guide the conversation so that you have the opportunity to add these trust assets into the conversation?
Yeah. Well, or so like I'm thinking about, on this podcast, we regularly tell people, hey, you should be producing video content, right? And we point to guys like Jeb, and we say, look, here's Jeb, and he's doing weekly market updates, and he's answering, FAQs about real estate, and he's all the things Jeb's doing, right? Mm-hmm. Or we point to a guy like Chris Kwan, and we're like, hey, look at the stories Chris Kwan's telling about his life, in addition to showcasing his properties. And so those are other ways of building that relationship, because, if you're going to hire a guy like Jeb or a guy like Chris, or any number of people we've brought on this podcast, like you've established this sort of connection to them for a long time. And by the point that they're working with those guys, they're not going to be shopping for other real estate agents because of commission. Like, they feel something about those guys. They're just never going to feel about a Redfin agent or somebody who is just a discount person, right?
They see the value there.
Yeah, but I want to say they also have like an emotional connection.
Yeah.
Well, but this also comes down to making an effort and creating the time to create these trust assets before the relationship is started, so that you can expose them to the trust assets once you have an opportunity to create a relationship. It's that content marketing piece. So if you, Dustin, have this, and this might be you as the leader or somebody on your sales team, what if they were weekly creating this little trust asset, either a piece of content or a video about a strategy on how the real estate agents can retain more business, get more repeat and referral business that then your salespeople can distribute? Then you're creating value for your employees by providing them with the tools to then forward to their clients to be able to build trust with the company as a whole. So this is a very challenging question. I mean, it's not a simple answer, but it's a very, very important question, because quite frankly, this is a 30% of your business problem. Like, you're either losing or gaining 30% of your business by focusing on this topic.
Yes. Well, and so I think, like, I really appreciate one thing of clarity I've gotten, one bit of clarity, and one thing I appreciate about this conversation so far is that I was focused on the wrong moment. Like, I was focused really heavily on the moment where somebody comes and says, hey, I just switched to a new brokerage and they're kicking me $700, which literally that's happening. Like, that I'm up against that. Right. And if that moment happens, I feel like, based on our conversation right now, the answer, like the honest answer to that is, to if me telling my sales reps is they're hit with that is like, well, you're kind of in trouble, right? Because $700 at that moment is a bigger value proposition than all the stuff you've done for this client. Like you just not done enough to make them not even think about the fact that they could get $700 going elsewhere.
You
right?
are worth less than $700 to that agent.
Yeah. I mean, really, that's
super crude, but it's true.
Yeah. And then the response is, you know, you can try and hit them with like, well, but is your escrow company going to cost you a deal down the road? Or you could try and hit them with, are they going to answer the phone? And we have done that. And by the way, when we say that, this is what the agent says to me. Well, no, they're crap, but you know, I get $700. And so, but that now, you know, my response, what I tell my sales team in response to that is let that agent go, right? Like that person is not our people.
Well, it gets back to the 30%. If you win 1 out of 3 people that bring that up to you, you just preserved or grew your business by 30%. And you're not going to win them all, because you're absolutely right. And that's not an agent you want to work with, because they're so short-sighted. And the fact that they don't value those relationships, I mean, let's be honest, the most successful teams and salespeople out there aren't doing it because they're switching vendors all the time. This isn't the credit card game where you're trying to win points, right? And this is these successful teams. They have deep-rooted, established relationships with all of their vendors, all of their anybody that they work with, all of their service providers, because they can count on them so that they can deliver a message to their clientele that I am always going to deliver this consistent experience because I have all of these deep relationships, and I'm going to use those deep relationships to build one with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I love the word experience, because if someone comes to you and says, hey, can you cut your commission, you know, by 1%, or can you beat this rate, or Lighthouse, can you figure out a way to, you know, hit me with $700 that my broker's hitting me with right now? It's like the experience you're delivering is worth less than whatever that ask is. And that's on you, right? Like that, at that point, like that's just on you. And you just didn't do the work you needed to do up front to avoid that objection.
Well, you never had a relationship with that person if they're willing to dump you for that. Because if there was, that wouldn't be.
It'd be a non-issue.
It would be a non-issue, or they would call you up and say, "Remind me again why you're the greatest escrow company in the world, because this is really, really interesting." And then you're going to remind them of everything you've done to sustain that relationship over the period of time that you've been working with them. And they're going to be like, "Yeah, no, you're right." And you know, it's like, okay, thanks for talking me off the ledge. Because listen, the reason why they offer $700 is because they know it's shit and they can't earn the business, so they're trying to bribe you into doing business with them.
Oh, 100%.
And there's an ulterior motive there. They're requiring you to use them because they're making money off of it.
Yes.
And is that really how you want to make decisions? Right? That's how a lot of homeowners decided to buy homes prior to 2008, right? So it's like, do you want this 2-year fixed interest rate with a 3-year prepayment penalty? Okay, your payment will be really low for 2 years, you know, and then they get enticed by that, and they lose their house in 3 years.
Well, I think the point is we are all tempted to focus on that moment where the carrot is dangled of a discount or a kickback. And we just were like, oh no, we got to like have the right response. And it's like, we all need to step back and zoom out from that moment and see the bigger picture. And if the bigger picture is, I ignored you and then the moment happened, you're going to get washed out. And I think that so now let me step back from the escrow situation, because I think that this is the looming threat for real estate agents. When I look out, and by the way, I care a lot about this, real estate agents, because look, if you guys lose to Zillow, I lose to Zillow. Everybody in this conversation loses to Zillow if you lose to Zillow. Let's just be really clear. So When I think about the looming threat to agents, I see our top clients at Lighthouse were really, really great if at the zoom out of having this, of establishing some sort of emotional and intellectual or relational connection with their clients ahead of time, and then the transaction happened. And even if commission, people are still going to ask for commission reductions and whatever, but like you just move through it because you have that established relationship.
You don't lead with it.
You don't lead with it.
Exactly. That's a really good point. I don't want to gloss over that. It's okay to be competitive in a truly competitive situation.
Sure.
Especially if it adds to the relationship, because if you're doing it right, you already have a great relationship and they're like, please talk me out of this or help me make this decision easier because I don't want to jeopardize a relationship that I have with you. And that's different from, no, I'm not going to use your company that I don't know anything about because I get this.
Right. Yes. But the agents I see that are struggling are the ones who are focused on those moments. They're zoomed in, they're looking at the discount kickback moment and they're like, okay, what discount or kickback can I give? Right. And the same is true. I'm not just dunking on real estate agents. Escrow people do it too. And that's why my industry is at a point where there are all these secretive side companies that are printing flyers. There are marketing reps that get bonused insane amounts of money and then they go spend that money, their private money on, buying off agents. Like that has all happened because everyone has reduced, like they've just hyper zoomed into, I need to bribe.
If you're leading with a discount, you just haven't done the work of communicating your value, or you're having a hard time articulating your value.
Yeah.
You just need to find different ways to articulate it.
Yeah. Here, let me go ahead and serve up and push play on this broken record. This is a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. It really is. The scarcity is, oh my gosh, I'm going to, I've got this $700 that I'm going to do. It's not the abundance of having this deeper relationship. If you're making decisions on the fly based simply on this, I guess it's always monetary, isn't it? That's really what we're talking about. All of our conversations are financial incentives, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if you start thinking about it that way, what's more valuable than money? And it sounds like a dumb question, but if you really thought about it, there's a lot of things that are more important than money. And I think you need to go through that thought experiment and have that conversation with yourself, because again, I pulled 30% out of my butt, but I truly believe this is, wait, let me rephrase that.
That just sounds funny.
I truly believe this is a 60% swing in your business. You're either earning an additional 30% of you're either growing your business by 30%, or you're losing 30% of your business if you're not thinking along these lines. If you're simply focusing on, and the other thing is you're going to be economy proof when you do that. Because at some point, money isn't going to be the most important thing. At some point, they're going to need an expert. They're going to need somebody that they can trust and who they can count on. And maybe that's a good rebuttal as I say that out loud is, you know what? For this transaction, that $700 might work for you. But do you remember last year when we had that lien that showed up and we did all of this stuff? $700 wouldn't have saved that transaction back then. You would have been screwed, right? So I would empathize. Listen, I get it, but you're not going to feel great about $700 when you lose the deal. And you're not only going to lose the $700, but you're also going to lose your commission. Yeah. So, if you're willing to risk that, if you're willing to risk that, then, good luck. It was nice knowing you, but it doesn't sound like a sound business. But I guess here's what we're talking about is you need to practice being prepared for this conversation.
You need to practice being prepared to defend your value. It's what Josh does on a lot of his calls.
100%. 100%. It needs to be a part of everything you say, you do, you think. That is part of your dialogue at all times. Is your value, your long-term value is front and center of every single conversation that you have. So you really need to practice it. You need to practice it, because if you don't practice it, you're going to get caught on your heels. You're going to sound dumb, because the only thing your lizard brain is going to do is, I can match that, or whatever. All you're going to do is, oh, I can keep up with the Joneses. I can be a Jones too and not stand out in any way, shape, or form. It's like, that's exactly what you're doing, is you're embracing mediocrity, and quite frankly, as you're sacrificing your value if you're not building it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such a good point. It sounds good theoretically, and also I would say, like, if I were a salesperson struggling with this right now, I'd say, yeah, Scott, like, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like that's just a good hypothetical. What I might say to that kind of sales rep is, if you were to walk into a BMW dealership and say, I'm only going to pay you for a 3 Series what I would pay for an entry-level Kia, they would just tell you to leave. Right? Like, because they know that their car is built better than an entry-level Kia. Everyone in the world knows. And your lack of confidence in their BMW is not a them problem.
Well, let's go to a really good Orange County example. Fletcher Jones Mercedes-Benz, right? They are known for their service. You can take your car to their anytime, get service done on your car, get your car washed, sit in a nice lounge, drink coffee. It's really about, are you delivering an experience, or are you delivering a price point? And that's kind of what it comes down to.
Do they serve old fashions while you wait for your vehicle to get serviced?
Foot massages, little petty manning.
Ricardo's going to go buy a Fletcher Jones car today.
Yeah. Well, no, but when you see Fletcher Jones commercials, they're not talking about the prices of their cars. They're talking about the experience of being a part of their family. And this isn't a new conversation. This conversation has taken place since the history of businesses. Is if you're not building some sort of value or building some sort of experience or narrative, then the value of that relationship is going to devolve to the lowest common denominator, which is, can I save a few shekels? And that's not a relationship based business model.
Well, and why this is so interesting to me is because I have definitely had conversations with my sales team. I've had conversation with real estate agents, etc. And, I tell them, hey, we have to be doing more to plug into the community and create these experiences, these relationships, right? Whether it's doing like recycling day in your neighborhood farm, or whether it's hosting classes to talk about what's just going on in the industry, or tactics for, building wealth off your home, whatever, right? And people look at that and they just say, well, but how's that going to get me to close a deal right now? And it's like, no, you have to understand, like, you're going to do a lot of these sorts of things, and they're not going to result in immediate conversion of business. So where do you put that? You put that in the long tail of things you do ahead of time to build a relationship, so that when you're in the middle of a transaction, which will eventually come, right? And someone comes along with that carrot of a discount or a kickback to your client, you're going to have something in place to make you resilient against that, right? You're going to be able to say, hey, look, here's all the things I've done for you in the past. Like, do you remember the conversations that we had 2 years ago? And I told you, now's not the time to sell your home, the market, or now is the time, but whatever, right? Like, remember how I helped you, Scott? You pointed this out. Remember how I helped you then? Here's our history. Stick with me, because this person, you don't know them. You're in the middle of a transaction. Things are going to get a bit crazy. You're going to want to trust the person that's giving you advice, and that's why you stick with me, and that's why that's how I make my money, and that's how I help other people, right? I think people will get that. But if you haven't done that work ahead of time, then then you just have to convince somebody you're better, and you can name a bunch of stuff. Like, I can name the fact that we pick up our phone and we're highly responsive to emails and whatever, but like, That's probably not going to move the needle. It'll move the needle sometimes, but like you need that long tail.
Well, and it's also a screening mechanism. You're not going to win them all, but the ones that are just want, because what they're really, so if an eight in your scenario, if an agent that you have a long-standing relationship with brings that up, all they're really asking you to do is remind them why they work with you. They just want an excuse to be able to justify turning down the money. They're not asking you to match it necessarily. They're just asking you, they're just saying, listen, this sounds really good. I could use it. $700. Remind me again why I work with Lighthouse. And these are the things that your salespeople need to be able to identify and understand so that they know how to approach it. Because the worst thing that you want to do is just vomit this list of values at them and try to convince them, like try to overpower that offer with words. Well, we do this and we do that. You've lost. It's like, listen, John, I understand, man, but again, remember that one transaction that we saved? That I saved you $20,000. So the way I see it, we're already ahead of the game. That $700 isn't going to even touch this.
Right. Yeah.
So no, but it's something you have to adopt as part of your culture, that conversation. And you need to continue to build on it and explore it and discuss it with your team. And quite frankly, you need to get your team involved in coming up with amazing, have a contest where you send you give them a $200 gift certificate to take their family out to dinner. Whoever comes up with the best, value add strategy that month or something like that. Get your team involved and get them owning the fact that they're more valuable than a spiff that some stranger offers them to cheat on their wife.
Right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Ricardo, do you have anything else you want to throw in on this? Or
no, I think for the agents that are listening, it's just, you have to get comfortable with always being prepared to defend your value, over communicate your value. Just get ahead of how you do that. I got a great email from somebody going back to that example that I said earlier. This agent lost a few listings to somebody else because the objection was, or the excuse was, the market's so hot, I can just put a sign up and it's going to sell. I got an email from another agent that was, it's not always about highest and best price. And it was a 3-minute video that said, hey, even while the market is so hot, it's not always about highest and best price. It's about being and working with an experienced realtor who's going to be able to negotiate the best terms in addition to the best price. So being able to negotiate the best terms means different things to different people. But here's 3 scenarios where we helped our client negotiate the best terms for their house.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I don't think anybody's really talking about that, though, right? And I love how in her example, she's getting ahead of it and addressing those objections before they even come up. I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm just saying, I think we need to do a better job of like over communicating or getting ahead of and communicating those types of moments.
And even the specific example of it's a hot market and we're getting above asking price. You're right. You could probably list this as a FSBO and you could probably get above asking price. But with my marketing team and my system, I can get you even, we have the potential to get even higher above asking price because we can facilitate this much more exposure and we can increase the buyer pool because of my reputation in the community. There's a lot of different ways you can battle that. But seriously, if you're just trying to match an offer, you've lost. So you're 100% right, Ricardo. You really have to But what you're talking about there also is they already had that trust asset. They already had that dialogue in a box to be able to pull out when that conversation took place. When that question came up, they already were prepared they had a tool set for that. Right. And so that's where, and I guess that's what we're talking about here is understand that this is something that you're going to need to win business in the future, because Zillow's not going to stop trying to steal your business. Quicken's not going to stop lying to consumers about getting mortgages. They're going to double down. They all are.
Yeah.
And it's a race to the bottom for those guys. And we can differentiate ourselves with value.
Well, and so this might be the subject of another podcast, but if after hearing all this, you're in sales and you feel like, and I felt like this in the past, by the way, so this is not a statement of condemnation. You feel like you don't have anything of value that you can fundamentally offer to compete against the discounts and the kickbacks. Honestly, maybe it's time for you to do some soul searching about whether you belong in the industry or whether your business needs to fundamentally change.
No, that's absolutely true. The clock is ticking on that kind of, if you can't come up with something that sets you apart, then your time is limited. You just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can tell you in the early days of Lighthouse, I mean, a lot of our initial value proposition stuff was just me sitting in an office coming up with things, right? Which we all start somewhere, and a lot of people start there. But when once we got clients in the door through, various relationships, right? And I took a harder look at things, I realized that some of that was just nonsense. Some of the stuff we were talking about was just kind of like, it's not like we were lying. It was just, it was like, oh, we're this premier experience, but really we were just another escrow company in some ways. Right. And so we had to get honest about that. And we had to take a look at like really boring stuff. How are we delivering paperwork? How quickly are we returning phone calls? When people come into our office, what does it look like? Is it nice? Or are we shoving papers all over the place? We didn't have much in the way of paper because of how we were constructed. But I mean, is it cluttered and we're like shoving things all over the place to accommodate them? All of those sorts of things. And that's when we began spending money on the office, spending money on the folders that we send documents in, all of it. Right. And there's still, when I look around, like I see things that need to be changed. But if your mind isn't in that space, then you're going to be in trouble because you aren't doing the things ahead of time to be able to make yourself resilient against the discount and the kickback that is coming my way, your way, everyone's way.
Well, you're not going to deliver the experience if you don't have the vision. So what you mentioned earlier is you were saying these things and it felt hollow, but it wasn't hollow. It was the development of a mindset to build value around this vision. And over the years, you backfilled that value because you were consistent with your vision. And that's really I think that's the conclusion that we came to, is recognize that this is a valuable, super important part of your business, and create that vision. What does it look like that people will not choose somebody else over price? What does that look like? And really unpack that and crystallize that vision, and then practice that vision until you build the value up, and then backfill the value into that vision. And then it becomes an experience.
Yeah, that's an awesome place to end it. I think we should just wrap it up there. Yeah. And maybe a future podcast is, how do you backfill a vision? Because that's a really interesting way to frame it. And here she is. It's a great way to frame it. And I think that has been for me a source of discouragement, because I have visions about what I think we can be, and we're not there. And I'm just like,
so vision and visions are different. Yeah. Visions are what happened to Ricardo after 5 old fashions.
Let's be honest. It takes Ricardo's liver a lot longer than 5. A lot more than 5.
I was gonna say, is that all?
Okay, with that, where can people find drunk Ricardo? Ricardo
at ricardobueno.com.
The source of amazing content. And actually, Ricardo is regularly producing stuff independently that does it's just value added all over the place, right?
I'm really excited about the next couple of episodes that are coming up. So we interviewed on the podcast. I interviewed Brian Gardner. So Brian Gardner is the co-founder of Studio Press. Studio Press powers, we had over 200,000 customers and they power over 600,000 WordPress websites on the internet.
Jeez.
So they just recently sold to WP Engine in 2018, and he's getting in the real estate with another company venture called Agent Engine. So that was an awesome conversation on, the value of building a personal brand. Something I've done all of my career, and I think in real estate specifically, it's important.
Which is directly about value.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's 100%. And then, like I told you guys, I hired an assistant. So she's been helping me edit, upload a lot of that content and get it scheduled. So I finally feel like I'm getting 30 days ahead. But we got Daniel Cross from Verse talking to us about, developing an effective contact and conversion process. We've had Daniel on the show here, and a few other guests, but it should be some really exciting conversations.
So ricardobueno.com is where you can subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, read all the really great stuff that you're producing every single week.
Awesome.
And Scott, Find My Way Home.
Yeah, findmywayhome.com is our consumer direct website. But my business partner, Josh Lewis, we are a mortgage brokerage in Huntington Beach by Wise Mortgage. We refer to Josh all the time, and he's been on our calls. If you really want to have a deep conversation about building value with your clients and building deep relationships, I encourage you to talk to Josh over at Bywise Mortgage and start. And he's just, like you said, he's a really great example of being confident in the value that he delivers because he's so passionate about it.
He's just a cool dude about it too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Look, I've worked with Josh. I've sent people to Josh. 100% 5 stars. I mean, the guy is awesome.
And we have the Google reviews to prove it. So he'll send you the link if you start talking to him.
So Bywise Mortgage is where you can find Scott's company, or if you're looking just for information about what's going on in the mortgage industry, findmywayhome.com. If you're a buyer and you're trying to figure this crazy industry out, because it's totally crazy right now. And my team over at Lighthouse Escrow, lighthouseescrow.com, would love to help you with your escrow needs. Everyone needs an escrow if they're going to sell or buy a home in the state of California. And we're a really awesome team of people that love what we do. All of my escrow officers have more than 10 years experience. Some of them have 20 or more years than even more than that. And they've seen it all. They work for the big title companies. They've worked for the in-house escrow companies. They have worked for all the big players. They are here because they love our culture and they love helping people out. That's what our culture is all about. They love picking up the phone, talking to our clients, our buyers and sellers, and helping them to understand, like, hey, here's where you're at in the process. Here are the problems that you're facing right now. Here's how people generally navigate those problems. And, this is kind of our advice. And our clients really, really love it. We have almost 50 5-star reviews right now on Google. We're adding more every single week. People just love working with us and with my team. And, I'm not going to pretend like it's me. Like, you're not going to get stuck with me. That's my job is to support the team.
Frankly, Dustin, I think you just said what your value proposition is. Every one of our escrow officers have 10 plus experience in the industry.
Yeah.
You can't replace that. That's huge.
Yeah. No, they've seen some things.
Man.
That's awesome.
That's all of us. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd love for you to check us out, The Marketing Trench on YouTube. We have all of our previous episodes there. And we have even chaptered out some of the most recent episodes. So if you want to kind of jump around and just take a look at specific things, last week we posted about different video tools, for example, that you can use to kind of make videos very quickly. And that's all broken out really cleanly for you if you just want to look into things like Loom or some of the other tools that Ricardo shared. That's all over at YouTube. Please subscribe to us, and we would appreciate it. Until next time, this has been the Marketing Trench.
Yeah.